Hi traders, Mandy here from High Performance Trading. So I was just in Switzerland for a week, and let's be honest, the Swiss have the best ice cream, right? Even better than the Italians. And so I was walking down, through downtown Zurich, and then I see this Mövenpick ice cream shop, and I was like, "Wow, ice cream!" And in my mind, I was thinking about how delicious the ice cream is going to be, how sweet it's going to be on my tongue. And yeah, before I knew it, I found myself in the ice cream shop and walked out with an ice cream. So this is actually dopamine at work. Now, dopamine is a little molecule that's dancing between our brain synapses, and it lights up the reward centers in our brain. So it's like a messenger hormone that creates happiness, and it also creates focus and motivation. But it can also, when we have a lack of dopamine, it can create anxiety, it can create irritability, and when dopamine works against us, it creates this craving and makes us feeling really, really addicted. So dopamine has so many different uses, and we can use dopamine always, or let's say the other way around. Every time we create a new habit, dopamine is involved. So when we have a habit that is not good for us, like let's say a drug habit or a chocolate eating habit, that's dopamine. But also if we create a supportive habit, like going for a run every day, going to the gym, um, ice baths, meditation, that is also a dopamine kick that is rewarding us, that creates this habit of, I want more of that. Now, here's also the connection. Here's exactly what happens in trading when we have dopamine involved in our trading game. Now, for most traders, this is very unconscious, and that's why my purpose here is to make it conscious for you what's actually going to happen in your brain chemistry. Because the thing is, over trading and oversizing is nothing to do with the charts. That's really a matter of your brain chemistry. Now, let's suppose you see a really big candle. In that moment, your brain is fantasizing about the profits you can make. Oh my God, this is, I'm going to make the profits for the week here in this trade. And so your dopamine reward centers kick in, and now you have an anticipatory effect in looking forward to getting that dopamine kick. So that's what we call an anticipatory dopamine. That's the same when I saw the ice cream shop and I was starting to fantasize about the ice cream, how good it's going to taste. That's anticipatory dopamine. Now, then we have reward dopamine. Reward dopamine is in that moment, the reward occurs. So the moment I eat the ice cream or the moment I take that profit. And then what happens is the brain's like, wow, that was good. I want more of that. And then the addiction can kick in if we don't manage our dopamine. And then, of course, there's the dopamine crash. So let's suppose the ice cream was not as good as you expected it to be, or you ended up in a loss in that trade of the century, and then the dopamine levels crash, and your brain says, well, we need to replenish those dopamine levels, and it wants more and more and more. And so that's when we get into over trading, oversizing, because it wants to make up the dopamine levels back. And the only way it knows to do that is through making new profits. But if you're not prepared, if we just jump into the market randomly, then the chance of making a profitable trade is very, very low. So you can see how important it is to understand how dopamine impacts us and our decision making, because wow, the brain's reward system, that's like a really powerful engine. It What we need to understand is that it releases the dopamine in response to triggers. And the triggers, how we manage them, that's what we have under control. So, how does that look like in trading? So, again, let's look at the reward response. We have a really great profit or a string of profits, and dopamine kicks in, dopamine addiction kicks in, like with a phone, like with social media, and the brain says, I want more, I want more, I want more. And suddenly we are on this frenzy of wanting to have more profits without focusing on our process, on looking, is there actually an entry? that rewards going into this trade, or is it just the brain chemistry cheering us on? And that's really important as well. So I was working with a trader who had the best trade of his career, was like, was a seven-figure trade in a day. And I was very careful not to reward him by saying, "Hey, amazing, well done, I'm so thrilled for you," because I knew that's going to um, kick off his dopamine brain regions, and then it would become an addiction. And after that, you would then start looking for more dopamine kicks, wanting another seven-figure day, and that's really, really important. So we have to be careful when someone has an extremely outsized profitable trade or success, that we don't start with the dopamine kicks here. And I said that to him afterwards as well. I said, I'm really careful here. It's not that I don't appreciate what you created. It's amazing. Like, it's no top level, but I want to be mindful of your dopamine reward centers. Then we have the anticipatory dopamine. So that's what kids have, for example, when they're coming home from school and they want to go straight to PlayStation, play computer games, and then we don't let them, and then the dopamine crash. And so that's all dopamine driven. Once again, if we understand how that works, we can manage kids better as well and help them not to get addicted to their computer games. Now, the dopamine reward is in that moment when we make a profit. The anticipatory is when we prepare for the markets or we prepare for a trade, and then we expect or we hope, we anticipate a nice profit, the feel-good feeling of a nice profit. Now, if that turns into a loss, then we have the dopamine crash, right? So it's make it really, really obvious to yourself that, wow, I was expecting a profit here. Now I have a loss. It feels horrible. The reason why it's feeling horrible is because my dopamine levels just crashed. And now I have the impulse to jump right back in to replenish my dopamine levels, but I need to do that in a more functional way, in a more constructive way. So impulse and overtrading is just a dopamine kick in disguise. And that's really good to know. So um, what is also really interesting is there have been some insights, some research. For example, they found out that people who experience ADHD, amongst other things, they have low levels of dopamine. And the low levels of dopamine, they cause them to be not motivated. They find it hard to be focused. And what they then looked at is they gave students dopamine medication, so ADHD medication, which increases the dopamine levels. And now these healthy school kids with a healthy level of dopamine had too much dopamine in the system, and they would make really rash decisions. They also couldn't focus, and they would be too hasty to draw conclusions. What I see a lot in trading as well, right? So people, again, they see one big candle and then they jump into the trade thinking, oh, now the market has to move fast after that candle. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's what our analysis is for. Now, another really interesting experiment that, what's her name again? Dr. Lemke, the one who wrote Dopamine Nation. She writes about this in this book, in her book. And it was an experiment where they asked healthy people and addicted people the same question. Something like, after awakening, Bill began to think about his future. In general, he expected to. And they had to finish that sentence. And it showed that the addictive personality people, they would give a time frame of, in the next 9 days. So he expected to, and then whatever happened would happen in the next 9 days. Then other the healthier people, they would have a time horizon of years, right? So several years. And that was really, really interesting to know, because that's the same in trading. When we go on tilt, we have a very short-term time horizon, right? We just think about the next trade. when we are well prepared and our dopamine levels are balanced, we think about the whole trading year. It doesn't matter if I have a loss now. It doesn't matter if I have a losing streak here because I know I'm here for the long term. So again, these experiments are super helpful to understand what is going on for us in our trading. So it shows that dopamine shrinks the sense of our future, but discipline expands the sense of our future, right? Because that's where we can think rationally. Now, once we recognize this vicious cycle of dopamine, we can break it, right? So instead of chasing dopamine in the markets, traders can be really well prepared. So there's really different ways of replenishing our dopamine levels. We can do it with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but then we just get those dopamine spikes. So it's not very helpful because the dopamine doesn't stay leveled. But if we go to the gym, if we meditate, if we do ice baths, I love my ice baths, that is increasing the dopamine levels and the levels stay balanced for 2 to 3 hours. And that's what we want to get into the markets with, and not needing to chase our dopamine in the market. So that's really important. Also recognize that when you feel the urge to go on tilt, that it's most probably something to do with your dopamine, and then go and take care of your dopamine levels first before you continue trading. And yeah, just pause, breathe, and make sure that your mind, your brain chemistry is being taken care of before you trade. So you can see over trading isn't about the markets, it's really about your brain chemistry. And remember, every successful trader has a dark past, and every struggling trader does have a bright future. I hope this is helpful for you. If you want to find out more about one-on-one coaching or our other yeah, um, services that we offer to help you to level up or to become profitable wherever you are at, then yeah, send us an email and we have a chat. All the best.